I am the fan base for Cirque du Freak Vampire's Assistant because I honestly don't think anybody else gives a shit about this movie. Salutations, I'm Becca, this is Words Another Malarkey. Question, what is a cult classic? If you look it up on Wikipedia, you're in for an afternoon because it's a really long article. But from what I could decipher, opinions on what a cult classic or cult film actually is differ depending on who you're talking to. With purists tending to say that it is a movie that is not accepted by the mainstream, generally even controversial to the mainstream, that has some kind of artistic value that only they, a small subculture of the population, can really appreciate and enjoy. And then even that opinion differs. Like, there's really no unanimous definition of what a cult classic is because the term has been repurposed and reapplied throughout the history of cinema until it basically can mean anything if you use your imagination enough. Now here's the definition that I'm familiar with, and you can disagree if you want, I really don't care. A cult classic is a film that was not popular upon its release, generally a big box office bomb, or an indie film that maybe was not even released in theaters, that built a fan base after the fact because a certain subculture of the population, big or small, retroactively recognized its value either artistically or from an entertainment standpoint. I also tend to think that cult classic films aren't picture perfect. Like, there's definitely been this like upsurge of cult classic movies that are like just so bad they're good, and that is a category I think that is not valid in its own way, though not every bad movie can be lumped into a cult classic category, or otherwise everything literally is a cult classic. But it generally has some flaws, like either production wise or in the effects or the acting, but still lovable. Therefore, this is the criteria by which I am going to evaluate 2009's failed movie franchise, Cirque du Freak, The Vampire's Assistant. Let's go, baby! Part 1, what even the heck is this movie? So you've probably come across The Vampire's Assistant at some point, either on TV or on a streaming service. I think it was on Netflix for a while at some point. It kind of comes off like a Nickelodeon movie. It was made by... who was it even made by? Yeah, it was made by a company that makes movies. I totally did my research. And it totally bombed at the box office. This movie's budget was $40 million and it grossed worldwide $39 million. It didn't even break even. That's how not good this movie did in theaters. And after the fact, I think everybody just kind of forgot about it, but since I'm going to be talking about this movie, like, for the duration of this video, I should probably give you some background. So this movie was an adaptation of a book series called The Saga of Darren Shan. And my god, is it a saga, because it is a 12-book series made up of 4 individual trilogies, and each trilogy has its own like subtitle, I guess. And so the first trilogy is the Cirque du Freak one, and those are the books that this movie is based on. And because it was 2009, they committed a very common book-to-movie adaptation sin of the time by trying to truncate the first 3 books into one feature-length film. Bad idea, because there's just so much information, you can't get it all in, and it does show in the movie. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny this movie has flaws. That's why I'm talking about it in the context of a cult classic. It's not a great movie, okay? A couple other things to note about the book series. Number 1, the author's name is Darren Shan. Also, well, the author's real name is Darren O'Shaughnessy, but he went by the pen name Darren Shan, and he wrote these books as if he were the title character. Oh man, I missed an opportunity to say titular. So yeah, it's literally The Saga of Darren Shan by Darren Shan. Okay, and so of course the main character of the movie is also Darren Shan, and we'll get to him in a moment. The other thing about these books is that they are considered very dark and gritty. I remember seeing them. You probably, if you're in my age bracket, you've probably seen them too at some point in your life. I especially remember them being popular when I was in middle school, and they always kind of struck me as like a older kid's version of Goosebumps. And they always also struck me as like exclusively boy books. And I mean, to be honest, that was their target demographic, so it was kind of accurate. In any case, I had absolutely no interest in reading this series, but I did know that it existed. So when the movie came out, I at least had some context, and I think a lot of people my age did, and those that read the books had lots of context. And like most fans of a book series that see a movie or TV show adaptation come to life, they were probably really excited initially, but when they got in there, realized, oh, this is not at all like the books whatsoever. And though I read somewhere that this movie as a franchise was actually dead on arrival, like before it even bombed at the box office, they canceled any sequels, I can also see why the fan base probably wouldn't have helped with that at all. However, as somebody going into this with absolutely no context of the books, someone who does not give a crap about the books, no offense to those that read and enjoyed the saga of Darren Shan, I just consumed it like one does in this society of consumption. My introduction to it was I was at my best friend's house, like back when we were teenagers, and she had this movie and said that it was fun, and we put it on, and it was! But then, after the fact, in hindsight, I started thinking about it more and more, and wanting to watch it again. The more I thought about it, the more of an enigma it became, until I just had to rewatch it. And then from that point on, it became a yearly tradition, often associated with the month of October, because it's got vampires in the title, so Halloween. No, seriously, this movie, though entertaining on a first watch through, got progressively more entertaining the more times I watched it, and arguably got better the more that I watched it, because I started noticing things, quirky little things, that made the experience that much more fun. So, with all that said, what is this movie slash book series even about? Well, as the title suggests, there are vampires involved and also assistants, or one in particular, as a matter of fact. So our story, or rather movie, because I'm going off of the movie, not the books, follows two characters. But I know at least one of the main characters is the same. You have Darren Shan, played by Chris Masaglia, who we will talk about in a little bit because he is very important, actually. Darren Shan is a good boy. He gets good grades and does what he's told and is just an all-around good guy, I guess. And then you have Steve Leonard, played by baby Josh Hutcherson. And Steve is a bad boy, but Darren and Steve are best friends. So they have these kind of differing lifestyles, but for some reason they are still the best of friends. And they come across a flyer for a freak show, one night only, in their town. And despite their community not being too keen on the idea, they sneak out and go anyway and experience the wonders of this really kind of bizarre and funny freak show. But during the performance, Steve recognizes one of the performers as a vampire that he had read about named Larton Crepsley, played by John C. Reilly. So after the show, Steve sneaks backstage to convince Crepsley to make him a vampire. Meanwhile, Crepsley's act involves this spider pet of his that's like this big blue and red CGI thing. And Darren kind of low-key falls in love with it. And so while Steve's off trying to talk to Crepsley and convince him to turn him, he's stealing a spider. And so he overhears this whole conversation. And that's basically the background there. But the next day at school, he has the spider in his locker, and Steve finds out, and the spider gets out and bites Steve in the face because Steve insulted it, and I guess it's a smart spider. And so, desperate to save his delinquent friend, Darren tracks down Crepsley and begs him to give Steve the antidote. Now at this point it is revealed that this creepy villain dude has kind of been stalking these two boys for undisclosed as of yet reasons, and Crepsley is aware of this, so half to save his life and half because he's a vampire who doesn't have the most attuned of moral compasses, I guess, he agrees to give the antidote if Darren will become his assistant via becoming a half vampire. I guess in this particular incarnation of vampires, familiars aren't a thing. They have to be half vampires. But anyways, Darren agrees and gives up his life to save his friend and join the Cirque du Freak to become a half vampire That was out of order, but that's what happens. And then from there, Steve joins the dark side because there's like bad vampires, of course. And then the rest of the movie just kind of follows them getting pulled into this feud between vampires who don't kill their prey and the vampanese who do. Guess which side Steve joins? It's a fun time. It's not like the most airtight plot in the world, but the first 45 minutes are basically just everything I described. It's almost completely exposition, and this is almost a 2-hour long movie. So this is why you don't take a trilogy and smush it into one movie. There's just so much information to unpack. You can't do it in a 2-hour runtime even, generally, unless you cut out a lot, and they did cut out a lot as it was. But arguably, the 45 minutes that you are setting up this world and getting all the pieces in play is actually a really fun time, and arguably, in my opinion, I don't know, I guess arguably is the word of the day today, the better part of the movie. The rest is fun too in its own way, but severely more flawed, I think, than some of the setup is. So why is it good? Why am I bothering to talk about it at all? Why am I comparing it to a cult classic? Well, initially I just liked it because it was entertaining and funny and had some really well-delivered lines and some really bad ones and some really good writing and some really bad writing, and that just made for a fun opposition. It was like a grab bag. You never knew what you were going to get. Because while our main actor was a newbie at the time that this movie was made, almost everyone around him are seasoned, experienced actors, and a lot of them put on really fun performances, especially John C. Reilly, which leads me into part 2. This movie had no business having the cast that it did. So this movie was directed by Paul Weitz, who also botched the screenplay for another book-to-movie adaptation, The Golden Compass. I don't really care at all about The Golden Compass, books or movie, though I did watch the movie, I think, once a long time ago and thought it was okay. Arguably, The Vampire's Assistant is also okay. The cast for this movie consists of the following big names: John C. Reilly as vampire Larton Crepsley, Salma Hayek as the bearded lady / fortune teller. She's got like this clairvoyant thing going on. You have Ken Watanabe as the ringleader, Mr. Tall. You have Willem Dafoe as another vampire named Gavner who pops in for like 2 scenes, but they're still really fun. And then you have, of course, Josh Hutcherson, who would go on to become way more popular, but he already had an impressive repertoire by the time this movie was a thing. There's more. There's a lot of comedic actors in this movie, and honestly, that's what makes it work, because I alluded to the fact that fans of the book series probably didn't like the movie, and I never actually said why. This is why. The books are super dark and gritty, apparently, but the movie is campy and silly. It has its serious moments, but overall it tried to take a more light-hearted, family-friendly tone, which was probably a good call. I personally think it worked really well in its own way. Even though they probably could have gone with a darker, grittier feel, especially since they ended up rating the movie PG-13 anyway, thus kind of knocking it out of the family fun category. Honestly, I think that John C. Reilly did a great job in this movie. I think it was a great decision to cast him. I think he's a great comedic actor. I really do. But it was really, really refreshing to see him in a role that didn't cast him as like a giant man baby. He got to be like sophisticated and snarky and kind of mature because he's playing a 200-year-old vampire with like a lot of life experience and cynicism, and it just came off really fun and genuine, and it just looked like Reilly had a lot of fun with the role, and it was fun to see him flex his acting chops because he's actually a really talented actor with a really great range, and this is one place that you wouldn't expect to see him.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I am so excited to be here in an anonymous small town which used to have character but is now just a bland suburb filled with chain stores and surrounded by slums. It really is a pleasure to be here.
But then it doesn't stop at Reilly. Most of the actors put on really fun performances, especially the comedic actors, because they got to let loose and have fun with these wacky roles. You have all these like circus freak characters. There's a really great quote in the behind the scenes. Yes, I watched all the behind the scenes, which just ended up expanding my appreciation for this movie, where Orlando Jones, who played Alexander Ribbs, says something to the effect of, "I think there comes a point in every actor's career where they want to play someone that eats body parts." All of these actors got to have a lot of fun playing these weird, wacky, unconventional roles, and it made for kind of a fun showcase of what a lot of these comedic actors could do. Is every performance in this movie immaculate? Absolutely not, which brings me to poor little Chris Massaglia, because he was the tender age of 17 when he was cast to play Darren Shan. Props to them for actually casting a 17-year-old to play a 17-year-old, but it also kind of proves why they don't generally cast 17-year-olds to play 17-year-olds, because he was really new to acting. He'd had a few smaller roles before, but this was, I think, his first big acting gig in like a feature-length film. So he was really inexperienced. And then he was up against Josh Hutcherson as his co-star, who was his same age, or around his same age, but who already had a ton more experience up to that point. And no offense to poor Chris. When I used to recommend this movie to people, my disclaimer was usually, it's fun, it's campy, it's got vampires in it, John C. Reilly's really good, but the main actor is a piece of cardboard. And yes, while in a lot of scenes he is a piece of cardboard, now I know why. He was surrounded by A-list actors, and he was one of the only ones that had vastly less experience than them. Now that also meant that he had access to a lot of really talented, knowledgeable people who could help him and coach him, and I'm sure that helped him a lot. And I think Reilly even says in his interview that he did coach him, and that like he might have been trying to be nice too, but he was like, it's cool to see how new actors will bring a sort of like fresh perspective to the table. Maybe that was his way of saying like, man, this kid is really far below the standard, but he's really trying his best. So I used to just write him off as a bad actor, but that really wasn't it, because now, having watched this movie a million times, there are scenes and lines where Massaglia actually does a really good job and comes off really genuine. And actually Paul Weitz, in the behind the scenes features, said that the reason that he cast him was because he had this sort of down-to-earth naturalness about him, and he didn't want the character of Darren Shan to come off as too unrealistic, which is why apparently he favored Massaglia's inexperienced underacting to someone with more experience, but who perhaps would have made the role a bit more dramatic. However, Paul Weitz, I don't know the first thing about movie making or directing, but I want to say that some of the blame lies with you, because you cast a completely green actor as your main protagonist, surrounded him with actors way more experienced than him, and then told him to underact while everybody else, literally everybody else on screen, is overacting. That's gonna make the performance stand out, and not really in a good way. So yes, while Massaglia does have some awkward deliveries and you can see his youngness and inexperience in a lot of his scenes, I think a lot of the problem was in the directing and in the acting direction he was given compared to everybody else. He stuck out like a sore thumb, and maybe that was the point. I guess that's what he was going for, but it just makes him seem like such a stick of cardboard, piece of cardboard, stick of what? I don't know. It just makes him look flat while everybody else is 3D. But that also makes for a really fun viewing experience, which leads me into part 3. I quote this movie on a regular basis, and I don't care who knows it. Not all of the writing is great. I already said that. The pacing is a bit wonky, and the middle kind of lags, and the plot overall is just trying to stuff too much into one movie. However, there are some really clever lines, and I really don't know how much is lifted from the books, but I want to believe that at least some of it was, because there are some really great zingers. I don't know, not all of them were trying to be funny, but there are just some really good lines delivered really well, especially by Reilly and by the guy that plays the villain, Mr. Tiny. Oh my god, he just plays such a gross, creepy fat man, but the actor does such a great job pulling it off. I think the guy's actually like a Broadway actor, and you can like see it. There are a lot of enjoyable scenes and a lot of funny scenes, either intentionally or unintentionally, and even the ones that aren't good are still charming, especially now with the knowledge that Massaglia was as inexperienced as he was. When you hear him deliver lines in his flat monotone, such as "life isn't meaningless," or there won't be a war if no one hears about it, they actually end up unintentionally funny. And I enjoy them. This movie should be turned into memes. The memes are there, they're ripe for the picking. The problem is that nobody would understand the context because literally nobody cares about this movie except for me. And the only meme I've seen is where they took this line where Steve is standing over Darren's coffin after he fakes his death.
Darren, I hate you so much for leaving me here with these idiots.
And that's the only one I've ever seen. But my God, is that a great line, and I wish I saw it applied in other places on the internet. Because there are a lot of lines like that that are just really fun, okay? It's just, I'm sorry, I'm articulating a lot, okay? The Sicilian in me is coming out, apparently. Because I just think this movie deserves a little bit more credit. Maybe not the writing as a whole, but how the lines were delivered in context. Especially by the experienced actors, but also by the inexperienced ones. Jeez, is that so much to ask? Everybody go watch this movie so that my little inside jokes can be understood. So what makes this movie a cult classic? Let's go through the criteria. Was it unpopular upon its release? Yes, we have established that it didn't even break even worldwide. Ouch, that must hurt a lot. Now I can definitely see why they didn't decide to make sequels. Does it have artistic or entertainment value? I think it does. It has some good effects. It has a lot of good acting and some very good lines and some very fun set pieces. I think that the Cirque is really fun and colorful, and in the behind the scenes features they take you on a tour and it looks pretty cool. And it's fun to be there, I guess. And even the white suburban neighborhood that Steve and Darren live in at the beginning is, in my opinion, really well done because it's almost off-putting. Like, everybody wears pastels, and that was on purpose, and like everything's just a little bit too perfect. And I think that was also on purpose, and it sets a really fun contrast later on to all the like dark colors and bright colors of the Cirque and surrounding areas. So I thought that was well done. Entertainment-wise, I was entertained. And if you like campy vampire movies, I think you'll be entertained too. Now for the next criteria, did this movie build a small but dedicated fan base after the fact? No, I don't think it did. I think that people watch this movie and enjoy it, especially people that didn't read the books. I think that some people somewhere enjoy this movie as much as I do. But I am probably alone in my fan base of one for thinking this movie should be a Halloween cult classic, because it's an extremely personal, subjective, nostalgia-biased assessment. But as for the last criteria, and these were in no particular order of importance, is it quotable and or memeable? Yes, it is incredibly quotable and memeable. Even the bad lines, especially the bad lines. Holy crap, do I need to go make memes and disperse them around the internet for you? Go meme this movie, it's asking for it. The fact is, this movie could have been a lot worse. You look at it and you see the bones of something good. If they had just made some slightly different artistic and directorial decisions, if they had spaced out the story a little bit better, if they hadn't tried to cram 3 books into one, if they hadn't alienated the fan base of the books, then yeah, it could have been a lot better, but it could have been a whole lot worse. Honestly, it has no business being as fun of a ride as it is. When you go into this movie, if you go into it, just know that like you're not in for the best vampire movie experience of your life. Like, have I not made that clear yet? But if you like watching movies and not taking them too seriously, I think you're gonna really enjoy it and be surprised by how many good elements there were. There's just also a lot of not good ones too. But that is what, in my opinion, makes a good cult classic. Lovable flaws. So we've got 3 out of 4. We got 3 out of 4 criteria, 75%. That's a passing grade. I say yes, approved. This movie is a cult classic. And since it has vampires in the title and I guess takes place in the fall, I say that it is the ideal, campy, spooky not scary. I don't even know if it's spooky. It's not even spooky really. It just has vampires in it. And absolutely not scary, viewing experience for this Halloween season. And much like Darren Shan, I too have a destiny, and that is to promote this movie and make sure people know that it is not as bad as Rotten Tomatoes says that it is, okay? A lot of the movies that Rotten Tomatoes says are bad aren't actually bad, and a lot of the movies they say are good aren't actually good. Rotten Tomatoes lies to you. If you want to take one thing from this video, take that. Rotten Tomatoes is a liar. Appendix / part 5 or part 4, what part were we on? Whatever. Where are they now? Well, since most of these actors were big name actors to begin with, we know where most of them are now and what they've done. However, there is one name among the pantheon that kind of faded from view, and that is poor little Chris Massaglia. What happened to him? So I got super duper curious and I looked him up, and I was very surprised with what I found. Though he did star in a few other movies after The Vampire's Assistant, he didn't make a big career out of acting. That could have been a choice, that could have been because The Vampire's Assistant screwed him over, I don't know. But hey, not everybody who tries to become an actor sticks with it, and he didn't. Guess what he's doing instead nowadays? Living a normal ass life as a normal human man, and most importantly, this is gonna make me sound like a stalker, but this is like common knowledge, so you can go look it up yourself. I'm not some kind of creep. He lives in Blaine, Minnesota with his wife and newborn child, and in 2020 he ran for city council for the town of Blaine, Minnesota, and won! And he is currently serving on the city council of Blaine, Minnesota. And I just think that's so wholesome. Like, it's just so, to me, it's like so encouraging to see actors go and have normal ass lives. He just did a thing and then did another thing, and now he's a city council member. He's like a reverse Ben Wyatt or something. Like, I love it. I think it's great. Good for him. That's really the point. It's good for him. He's living his best life. Anyways, keep it weird and have a very happy Halloween / October / autumn. And yeah, go watch this movie. I just want to believe that people actively recognized him as the kid from The Vampire's Assistant, and that's how he won his seat on the city council, is because of that fact. But I honestly highly doubt it. I mean, I'm sure that he actually knows things about politics and stuff. Looked up his platforms, really liked his platforms. Yeah, good for him. And he's like 29 years old. What the heck, man? Actor, councilman, father and husband at the age of 29? This kid's done a lot. What am I doing? What am I doing?